Hi, my name is Helena Zancani from the Barony of Dragon's Mist, and today I'll be showing you an embroidery stitch called the tent stitch. This was a fill or background stitch that was used throughout medieval and Renaissance Europe and is a great stitch to have in your repertoire. So I hope you enjoy this. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. All right, we are now ready to begin working on our tent stitch. To show you an example of what a finished item with the tent stitch is, here is a completed rose that I've done. All of the red parts are done in tent stitch in two different shades of red wool, and they're outlined with a running back stitch. Now at the top you'll see that we have a smaller rose that we're going to work on. There are two different things in the tent stitch that you need to make sure stay even. One is the height of your stitches, and the second is how much the degree to which they go sideways. So the easiest way to do this is by creating some guidelines. I'm going to use a simple clear ruler, mostly as a straight edge, and a very thin black pen. In this case, this is a Pilot G-Tech C4, and it is a 0.4. All right. Now, it is okay if these are not perfectly level. That's not really what you're focused on. You do want to get them as close to straight as you can. So, what I tend to use, just because it's simple on this, is I will use the width from the edge to this set of lines here. So I'm just going to line those up on the lowermost edge of my design and then trace a line right across. And there's my first line. All right, we're just going to go all the way up doing that. And I do the outer rows and the inner rows separate because I don't actually want those two to match up perfectly. If they do, it can get a little confusing as to which part of the pattern belongs to which rose section. And if you make a mistake here, do not worry. You are going to be covering all of this up with thread, so no one will ever see what has happened below that. Almost done. All right, these are our guides for how high the stitches are. So each set of stitches will go from one line to the next line. Now the next thing we'll need is the degree of tilt. I'm basically going to find what I think would be the most comfortable tilt for me. It's easiest to start in the middle. I think that looks really good. So I'm just going to draw my tilt line. And I don't need as many lines on this because this is really just to help me keep track of how far the tilt is. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to go ahead and use these longer lines right here as my sort of my guide. And remember, when I'm doing this, I'm only doing these outer petals, not the inner petals, and not these leaves. Those will be separate. All right, those are our guidelines. So let's put these tools away and start stitching. In this case, I'm stitching on linen, and I will be using this thread. This is a lace weight wool thread. It's beautiful. It is very period to use. It does break because wool fibers are fairly short. So just be aware of that if you decide to go with this. If you're starting out, I definitely strongly suggest using standard DMC or cotton floss because it will be much easier. We're going to do each one of these petals on its own as a separate stitching item. So since I'm right-handed, I'm just going to go ahead and start on this bottom left hand, and I'm going to start at the bottom. So again, we're doing from here down to here, and we'll make this really nice and simple. I find it easier to start from the top to the bottom. You might find it the other way, and that's perfectly fine. So we're just going to go in, keeping an eye on that diagonal so it stays really even with our guidelines, and we're coming back down right on that line. Now, it is perfectly okay if your edges are a little bit sloppy, because that will be covered up by our edge piece. So we're just going to edge this in a different stitch, and that will cover any sloppiness. When you're coming back up through the fabric, you really are going to be guided by how thick your thread is. So I'm using a decently thick piece of thread, so I will need less stitches, but it also means any mistakes I make will be a little bit more obvious. And if you've got a nice, even, open weave, like I do with this linen, you can almost go through every single one of those holes in the weave. If you don't have that, that's fine. Just work at the width of your thread. But if you do, it gives you another extra little guide to make this easy. Again, it's perfectly okay if once you get to that guide, you find that you've gone and tilted a little too much, or you've gone and tilted not quite enough. We're just going to re-center ourselves at that guide so that the rest of our stitches are nice and even. And we're almost done with our first line. When I am doing this at home, I love to put on some music or a documentary or a movie I've seen before that I don't mind if I miss the visuals, because I'm not going to be looking at the visuals. All right, and there we go. It's our last stitch, and that's our first section of the 10th stitch. After this, I would be going up one level to right here, and I would be stitching across this line. This line, of course, is the edge of our rose petal. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and please leave a comment below if you have any questions or have other stitches you would like to learn.